It wasn't the first time Sergei had hit Anna, but it was the first time it had become impossible to hide. She woke up with her face swollen, her left eye almost closed, and a pain that wasn't just physical. There was something different about that day, not just because of the more aggressive violence, but because, for the first time, she didn't cry. She sat on the edge of the bed, motionless, holding the pillow as if it were an anchor in a rough sea. The television was still on, showing. Children's cartoons, while Sergei snored on the couch, oblivious to the damage. Anna remained there, paralyzed for hours, in a dense silence that seemed to glue the walls together. And she only moved when the intercom rang. It was her mother. She said that she and her father were passing by and decided to go upstairs for coffee. Anna froze. Her first reaction was to run to the bathroom, try to cover the bruises with makeup, get sunglasses, anything to hide what had happened. But she didn't have the strength. When she opened the door, her parents were already there. Her mother stopped immediately. Her father, always dry, a former sergeant of few words, remained silent. Neither of them said a word. What followed was a heavy silence, more deafening than any scream. Anna tried to smile, but her face burned. Her mother just lightly touched her fingers to her cheek and murmured, "Anna," full of contained pain. They went into the apartment and stayed there for half an hour. Coffee was drunk. In silence. And when they left, Anna knew that something had changed, that violence could no longer be ignored. When the door closed behind Anna's parents, Sergei was still asleep. His heavy breathing came from the couch and made her feel silently sick. She got up and went to the kitchen. She washed the cup her mother had used and began to dry it with an old cloth. It was a simple gesture, but it gave the feeling that the world still obeyed some order. She picked up her cell phone. On the screen was a message from her brother, Costa. "If you need anything, call me. I'm on duty," but with the radio on. He, a light infantryman, spent more time away than around, but that day he seemed to have sensed something. Anna stood there staring at the message, her fingers still on the screen. For the first time, she considered telling him. Even so, she didn't respond. Fear was still greater than any impulse. What held her back was not only the possibility of a new attack, but shame. Shame for being in that situation, for having hidden it for so long, for not having left sooner. She knew that her brother was impulsive, direct, trained to act instead of thinking things through. Years before, during a military graduation, he noticed her teary eyes and almost caused a scene. At the time, Anna had covered it up, saying it was PMS. Now there was no way to hide it. The purple on her face screamed. And even so, the weight of guilt crushed her more than the bruises. Raised in a family that always extolled strength and discipline, she believed, deep down, that she was failing as a woman, as an adult, as a daughter. The house fell silent again. But it wasn't just any silence. It was the kind of silence that pressed on your chest, that made the air thicker and every thought louder. Anna went to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood in front of the mirror. Her reflection showed her as someone who looked like they'd just come out of a serious accident. Her skin was swollen, her eyes red, her expression exhausted. She tried to touch her bruised face with her fingertips, but the pain made her immediately recoil. She remembered something Costa had said on one of her rare days off. "First, we assess the wound, then we decide what to do." And at that moment, Anna was assessing not only the pain on her face, but everything that was destroyed inside. She felt ashamed, tired, and angry, not only at Sergei, but at herself, for having been silent for so long. She sat on the cold bathroom floor with a towel in her hands. She stayed there for over an hour, immersed in memories that weighed heavily on her. She thought about the wedding, the day she said yes, believing that Sergei was someone who would protect her. He had that calm manner, a crook smile, and beautiful words that hid his control well. At the time, Costa didn't attend the ceremony. She said she didn't trust her fiancé. Anna fought with her brother for weeks. She said he didn't know what love was. But now, everything made sense. The harmless jokes that hurt, the jealousy disguised as care, the slow cuts to her self-esteem, they were all signs. She ignored them, thinking it was normal, thinking that men were just like that. That's how she lost herself, pretending that what was never more than domination was love. When she left the bathroom, Anna noticed that the balcony door was ajar. Sergei, already awake, was smoking outside quite naturally. The scene made her feel instantly nauseous. The anger that took over was not like the other times. It was more solid, colder, a kind of anger that gave her strength. She walked right past him and went to the closet in the living room, where she kept the backpack. She began to stuff random clothes inside it, without folding them, without thinking. Sergei noticed and asked in a mocking tone if she was going to put on a little show. Anna didn't answer. Her eyes were dry, her face hard. It was as if her body had entered mission mode. No time to hesitate, no room for emotion. She continued packing her things, ignoring every provocation. With her cell phone in her hands, she dialed her brother's number. When Costa answered, she simply said, "Come get me." No, he didn't ask any questions. He just said he was on his way. Less than 20 minutes later, the military truck pulled up at the entrance. When Anna got out, she was carrying her backpack and her scarred face. Sergei tried to stop her from leaving, holding her arm tightly, but she shook him off with unexpected firmness. She went down the stairs without looking back. When she got in the car, Costa simply opened the passenger door, looked her in the eyes, and said, in a low voice, as if she had seen war up close, "It's over, okay?" Anna didn't answer. She looked out the window, her hands shaking in her lap. She knew it wasn't really over. But at that moment, something inside her had begun to change. During the entire drive to their parents' house, the two remained silent. Costa put on one of those old rock CDs that the brothers used to listen to as teenagers on the car stereo. Maybe it was on purpose, a discreet attempt to bring some sense of familiarity amidst the chaos. Anna, however, seemed absent. She felt dirty, broken inside, with her mind jumbled between shame and relief. When they arrived, their mother was already waiting at the door. The look on her daughter's face said it all. Without needing words, she simply hugged her. Anna broke down. She cried like she hadn't cried in years. A heavy cry, coming from deep within, filled with exhaustion. Her father, in the background, watched in silence, serious as always. After a few seconds, he said firmly, "No one here touches you anymore." The next 3 days were spent in seclusion and care. The mother slept with Anna, watching over her daughter's sleep as she had when she was a child with a fever. She made tea, put ointment on the bruises, and stroked her hair until she fell asleep. Anna didn't say Much. She spent hours silent, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how everything had gotten out at that point. Costa always came after work. He brought food, sat next to his sister, and without pressuring her, just stayed close. On the second day, he showed up with a folded piece of paper in his uniform pocket. He handed it to her bluntly. It was the number of the battalion's lawyer. "She guide you calmly," he said. Anna didn't answer. She put the paper away and took a deep breath. She still didn't know if she would have the courage to call. But for the first time in a long time, she felt that she was no longer alone. In the early hours of the fourth day, Anna woke up gasping for breath, with her heart racing and the feeling that the air had left the room. It was an anxiety attack, the kind she had always known, but pretended was just nervous. She walked to the kitchen, trying to control her breathing. She sat on the floor, leaning against the cupboard with her arms wrapped. Around her body. A few minutes later, her mother appeared, awakened by the sound of footsteps. When she saw her daughter in that state, she simply crouched down and wrapped her in a tight, silent hug that said more than any words could. They stayed there, on the cold floor, until Anna's breathing slowed down. There was something in that maternal gesture that gave her a little bit of security, even if only temporarily. For the first time, Hannah didn't say that everything was fine. She simply let herself be embraced. The next morning, she picked up the paper with the lawyer's number and dialed. The voice on the other end of the line was firm, calm, and immediately reassuring. The professional explained what could be done: protective measures, police report, psychological counseling, and legal advice. With each explanation, Anna felt the ground become a little firmer under her feet. She hung up the phone without promising anything, but already made up her mind. Costa was waiting for her. In the living room, when she saw the expression on her sister's face, she didn't ask any questions. She simply said, "Let's go to the barracks. It'll be easier to resolve everything with her there." Anna nodded. They got into the truck, and the road to the battalion was silent. But it was a different silence now. It was no longer the silence of muffled pain. It was the silence of preparation for a new beginning. At the police station, Anna was received by the lawyer with empathy and professionalism. The atmosphere was discreet, without excessive formalities. The woman seemed to have experience with stories like hers, which made Anna feel understood for the first time. The lawyer did not interrupt. She let Anna speak at her own pace, without rushing. Little by little, she described the episodes of abuse, starting with the most recent attacks and moving on to the first threats that, at the time, did not seem so serious. Costa followed everything in silence. His body remained still in the chair, but his clenched jaw betrayed the tension. At the end of the conversation, the lawyer made it clear. What happened to Anna was a crime, and now there was a process underway, with guarantees and support. As she left the battalion, the sun was shining brightly, but Anna didn't even seem to notice. There was a tiredness in her shoulders, and a strange kind of relief in her eyes. In the car, Costa turned on the stereo and let the wind blow through the windows. After a few minutes, he commented as if casting an anchor into the void. There are things that we can only overcome by going into war mode. But with strategy. Anna didn't answer. The phrase stayed in her mind, repeating like an echo. She thought about how many years she had lived in an undeclared war, where the only tactic was to resist in silence. Now, the simple act of speaking and formalizing was, in itself, a counterattack. They arrived home, and she went straight to the shower. She stayed under the hot water. For long minutes, sitting in the shower, as if trying to wash years of silence from her own skin. In the days that followed, Sergei began to try to regain control. He sent short messages, claiming to regret it. Then came long audio messages with a choked voice, full of promises of change and declarations of love. Then came the accusations. He said Anna was destroying his life, that her family had always wanted to separate them, that she was ungrateful. Anna didn't respond. The lawyers. Instructions were clear. Keep everything saved as evidence and not to contact her. Still, each notification set off an alarm. She listened to the audio messages, trembling, with her heart racing, but without letting herself get carried away. She no longer felt guilty for him crying. She began to understand that it was part of the cycle. And even though she was afraid, she chose not to go back. Her mother began to accompany her to her appointments with the psychologist at the support center. In the first sessions, Anna spoke little. She looked at the floor, fidgeted with her hands, and looked away. But the therapist was sensitive. She didn't force her. She just waited. And little by little, the daughter who had been silent for years began to speak again. In one of the conversations, the psychologist said something that stuck with her. Prolonged abuse dissolves identity. Anna understood immediately. She no longer knew what she liked to do, what she ate for pleasure, what she dreamed. Of for herself. For so long she had lived to avoid being hurt that she had forgotten what it was like to live freely. With each session, a fragment of herself would reappear. She would leave the room feeling lighter, even if it was only for a few hours. And that was a start. The hearing took place about a month later. Anna had spent the previous night awake. Her hands were sweating, her stomach ached, and her head was spinning as if she were on the verge of fainting. She arrived at the courthouse accompanied by Costa and her lawyer. She sat down on the bench with shaky legs. When Sergei entered the room, he looked like a different man, his hair combed, his expression like a victim, his shirt pressed. During his speech, he tried to turn the facts around, saying that Anna was unstable, that the marriage had collapsed because of her, that he had only tried to keep the family together. She listened in silence, her eyes fixed, her face expressionless. When it was her turn, Anna took a deep breath and began. She spoke firmly. She did not shout. She did not cry, but she recounted every detail. The room, which had been heavy before, seemed suspended in time. When she finished, there was no doubt that something important had been restored within her. Outside, the sun was shining directly on Anna's face, but she didn't complain. She walked slowly to the sidewalk. It wasn't complete relief, but there was a kind of peace there. Costa was waiting for her, leaning against the truck. When he saw her, he handed her a bottle of water and patted her on the shoulder. Not a word. The gesture said it all. On the way home, he asked if she wanted to stop by the barracks to visit some friends of his. It was an attempt to distract herself, to change her focus, and it worked. They sat in the battalion canteen, listening to mission stories, inside jokes, comments about the weather. For the first time in a long time, Aine laughed. It was a short laugh, almost shy, but honest. And In that small moment, something in her began to recover. The days that followed were marked by ups and downs. Some mornings, Anna would wake up feeling energetic, make coffee, read something, and believe that everything was going well. But all it took was the sound of a key in the hallway or a few more footsteps upstairs for her body to freeze. The therapist explained that this was normal, that the body would still react as if it were in danger even after it was safe. It was the so-called state of hypervigilance. The family helped as much as they could. The mother took care of the house tenderly and avoided questions. The father would make small repairs in the backyard just so that Anna would have something new to see. Costa, even tired from his shifts, would show up with junk food from the bakery, leave funny notes on the fridge, and pretend not to notice when his sister woke up scared in the middle of the night. Each one, in their own way, was rebuilding a part of her, returning to work was another internal battle. Anna took a leave of absence and put off returning as long as she could. When she finally decided to face it, she dressed modestly, with light makeup and a reserved expression. She arrived early, avoided long greetings, and went straight to her desk. Some colleagues greeted her with hesitant hugs, others with looks of disguised compassion. She didn't like that. She wanted to be seen as strong, not as broken. But one specific situation changed everything. In the bathroom, a younger colleague approached her with moist eyes and a low voice. She said she had been through something similar and had never told anyone. That made Anna understand that her pain, however personal, also had collective value. Her story could pave the way for others. And perhaps, in the midst of her own healing, she could help other women break the silence. As the weeks went by, Anna began to reorganize her life in small ways. She changed her haircut, removed objects from her old house that she still held onto out of attachment, and donated clothes that no longer felt like hers. She began to walk every morning, listening to music that reminded her of times when she still recognized herself. She reconnected with old contacts and responded to messages from friends she had pushed away under Sergei's influence. Many of them said they had always been there, waiting for this moment. The fear did not disappear completely, but it had lost its strength. Some nights were still. Difficult. Some sounds still made her heart race. But there was a difference. Now she could identify them. She knew she was reacting to the past, not the present. And that gave her more control than she ever imagined possible. The protective order was officially granted weeks after the hearing. Sergei tried to appeal, sent more dramatic messages, until one day he showed up in front of Anna's old building. He didn't expect that, at that very moment, Costa was getting out of his car just a few meters away. The reunion was dry. The soldier, upon realizing the situation, activated the protocols. The police arrived, and Sergei was warned. Since then, he has not come near them again. Anna, even though she was frightened by the attempted invasion, felt that that episode sealed something. Her brother's presence there, at that exact moment, represented everything that had changed since the day she came down the stairs with a backpack on her back and her eyes swollen. Now she was no longer at their mercy. She had a network. She had a voice. She had protection. She finally had a choice. Over time, Anna began to laugh naturally again, to sleep without jumping out of bed at the slightest noise, to eat slowly. She began attending a support group for women who had been through abusive relationships. At first, she listened more than she spoke. Each story affected her in a different way, but it also showed her that what she had experienced was not an exaggeration or weakness. It was standard. It was violence, and it was real. Over time, she began to tell her own story, and realizing the impact it had on other women gave her a new strength. The same voice that she once barely used to ask for silence at home now helped others understand that they deserved respect. She didn't see herself as a heroine, but she knew that resisting, rebuilding herself, and continuing to live was, in itself, a kind of victory. At home, the dynamics also changed. Her mother, who used to be very protective, started to give her more space. Her father, who had always been more reserved, would risk giving short advice with dry but careful phrases. And Costa was the foundation. Even in silence, he exuded confidence. One night, while they were washing the dishes together, he commented, without looking directly at her, "You walked out of a minefield without kneeling. That's rare." Anna didn't respond, but she felt that phrase settle inside her with a good weight, because it was true. She had spent years walking on eggshells, retreating from herself to keep the peace. Now, she walked with firmer steps. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes she doubted, but she didn't turn back. The path was set, and for the first time, she was the one choosing the direction. One day, Anna returned to the neighborhood where she lived with Sergei. She had to take care of a matter at the registry office and couldn't avoid walking along the streets she used to walk on every day. When she got off the bus, she felt her body react. Her shoulders stiffened, her chest tightened, her breathing became shallow. But she didn't run away. She walked slowly, observing the facade of the old building, the little grocery store on the corner, the bus stop where she waited alone. Everything seemed smaller. Or maybe she was the one who was bigger. She didn't stop. She walked straight past, without stopping. It was as if she were saying goodbye to a version of herself that had been trapped there for years. When she entered the registry office, she filled out the papers with steady hands. Her full name was there, without his last name, without the fear of being who she was. On the way back, the sun was already beginning to set on the horizon. Costa was waiting at the gate of his parents' house, playing with his cell phone, in uniform, ready for another shift. When he saw his sister, he raised an eyebrow, as if asking without speaking. Anna smiled, a real, calm smile. He returned it with a slight wave and opened the gate. Inside, the smell of baking bread filled the kitchen, and his mother hummed an old song. Anna went in, dropped her bag on the couch, and took a deep breath. The cycle had ended, not because everything was resolved, but because she had decided that her past no longer controlled her. The trauma was there, the scars too, but the woman who now sat at the table was different, and this time, whole. In the following months, Anna decided to go back to school. She remade old plans that she had abandoned along the way, started an extension course, and started to organize her finances with the help of her father. She also started writing again, something she had done since she was a teenager, but had abandoned without realizing it. She filled notebooks with fragments of thoughts, painful memories, and also plans for the future. Each written word was like a piece of paper that had been found again. Sometimes she still cried alone. Sometimes fear appeared without. warning, but now she knew what to do when that happened. She knew that feeling was not a weakness. It was just proof that she was alive, that she was rebuilding herself. And there was no rush, no guilt, just a genuine desire to move forward. On a Sunday, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea and the distant sound of children playing in the street, Anna looked up at the sky and thought about everything she had survived. She didn't romanticize it. She didn't minimize it. She knew that her story was one among many, but it was hers, and it deserved to be told. That's why, when she decided to write that story in a forum about overcoming obstacles, she didn't want applause or consolation. She wanted someone, somewhere in the world, to read her words and realize that there was still time, that it was possible to escape a cycle of abuse, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that there was life after the pain, and that, even on the worst days, continuing to breathe was an act of courage.